Hello, I'm Jonathan Koppell. I'm the new president of Montclair State University. Thrilled to be on campus, and I've been looking forward to the conversation we're about to have, an opportunity for me to answer questions from our awesome student journalists on campus. And so I don't want to take away any time. I want to have my feet put to the fire immediately and turn it over to you guys. I don't know if you figured out who's going to have the first crack at me. But we'll leave it there, and hopefully we'll get to cover a whole bunch of things that are of interest to the students. That's one of my great pleasures in being on campus is to get to interact with students. And so let's get going and hear what's on your minds and jump right in.
All right, President Koppell, I'm going to start off our conversation. My name is BERNICE NDEGWA from the Montclair NewsLab. So during your fall semester kickoff, where you addressed MSU faculty and staff, you mentioned that the university was built on indigenous land. Now, does the university plan on releasing an official statement or advocating for these communities?
Well, there's been a discussion at Montclair State University for a number of years to have a land acknowledgement as a university. I think that's a good idea. There's a process that's underway, so I don't want to step on that. As you heard, I'm very comfortable with that idea. I think you all know I'm coming to Montclair State University from Arizona State University. Arizona is a state with a very large indigenous population, and a very significant portion of the land is indigenous land. And I've become very involved in issues around Native American and tribal well-being and sovereignty. And so it's something that I care personally a great deal about, and I've been engaged in collaborations with tribes in Arizona. So I'm very excited about the idea that Montclair State University could not only acknowledge the history, which is part of it, but honestly be part of the solution in terms of advancing the interests of Native American populations and capturing in a more positive way all of the richness, the history, and the culture that comes from those peoples. It's something to celebrate. Yes, it's recognizing the bad stuff that happened, but it's much more than that, right? It's that there's this vein of music and art and philosophy and ideas that we should be embracing and taking advantage of. So I'm hopeful, and we've got a group of faculty and students that want to advance that. So I'm hopeful that that can become a highlight that this university can celebrate.
Thank you.
I'm JENNA. I'm from the Montclarion. As a president, how do you plan on increasing diversity among faculty and students?
Well, one of the great assets of this university is the diverse student body. I think it's a strength that can be amplified and leveraged. I think students today want to be in a diverse environment, and they want to not only be surrounded by a diverse group of students, but they want to benefit from being part of a diverse campus community. And I think that's important because as you all are figuring out what you're going to do and the world that you're going to inhabit, it's going to be a diverse world. And so if you're not prepared to live in that environment and get along with people that you might not agree with on everything, and you might not have exactly the same background. Well, if you can't handle that, you're not going to do very well in the United States in the 21st century. So that has to not only be sort of a demographic reality of our university, but we need to embrace it and make it a strength. It's a disconnect if the faculty and the leadership, frankly, doesn't also reflect the same diversity in the student population. So we need to make sure that when we're doing hiring and recruiting, we're drawing a diverse pool of applicants, and that we're making an environment that people want to come to, both, as I say, faculty and leaders. In the long run, the only way to really solve the faculty diversity question is to get more people going into academia representing the full diversity of the population. And so what I'd like to do is to create pathways for, as I just said, our remarkably diverse student population to see academia as part of the pathway that they would be interested in the future, because ultimately that's the only way that you build a diverse professoriate, right? Is if you get students interested in it, and that hasn't happened yet, to be honest. If you look at the pools of students who are going into graduate programs and who are pursuing faculty jobs, it's not as diverse as the student population I'm talking about in the country overall. So we need to figure out how to make academic jobs more inclusive, more approachable, more attractive to a wide range of students, so that in the long run, you have that pool of people who are excited about being on university campuses.
All right, I'm up next.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Kaya and I'm representing WMSC. And just speaking more about diversity, we have a diverse amount of student organizations on this campus, and typically you see co-curricular activities outside of normal classrooms and supplemented through in learning by doing, right? Outside of the academic curriculums. So during your presidential term, how do you plan on supporting these co-curricular activities?
Well, I'm a big fan of learning by doing. So you're speaking to the converted already on that. And so I have a couple different reactions. One is, I think there should be more hands-on learning opportunities embedded into every academic major. That's something that was a big part of what I did at ASU. In fact, we sort of committed ourselves to that goal by integrating into all of the majors in the college that I led a requirement that was called solutions-based learning, and you had to do an SBL. I'm trying to learn the Montclair acronym, so I'll throw one of my acronyms back at you, right? But you had to do an SBL, and that was just part of what every student did, and then that committed us, the university, to provide those learning opportunities for students. So I'd love it if it became sort of an expectation that every Montclair student was doing some sort of hands-on learning activity. And then, to get to your point about student organizations, wouldn't it be cool if part of the way that we delivered on creating those opportunities was to take advantage of the work that our student organizations were doing? So people always say, well, how about an internship or how about a job? Yes, but as you know, and as sort of implicit in the question, our students are already out doing fantastic things on their own. They've started organizations, or they're working in community organizations. Some of them are campus, but some of them are not campus. Well, why don't we try and make those experiences part of the for-credit activities that the students have? And the key is you have to be really intentional from a design point of view to say, okay, well, what is it about that experience that matches onto the course? I don't want it to just be like a box checking exercise, like, oh, well, she did 10 hours a week. Well, what was she doing? Like, oh, she was stuffing envelopes. It's like, well, I don't know what she learned by doing that. So you just got to make sure that it's actually adding value from a curricular point of view. But I think that should be a signature of this university, is that everybody who goes here is, yes, they're in the classroom, but they're quickly translating their classroom activity into some applied experience. And I always found that students who do that get much more out of the classroom part too, because it's not like, oh, you'll use this in 5 years. It's like, no, you'll use this afternoon, right? and that, I think students love that, and it's easier to motivate. Like, why should you do this? Because you're going to use it, not because it's going to be on the exam. I don't know. I don't think that that's. Yes, it'll get you there, I guess, to some degree, but it's much more engaging if you see the value of it in real time. And that's one of the reasons I know you guys are interested in how public service plays a role on the campus, and we'll get to that. That's one of the reasons why I think public service programs are so good, because it's another hands-on learning by doing opportunity.
Yeah, and being representatives from co-curricular activities, the future sounds promising.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time today, President Koppell. My name is Jack BARTECK, and I'm representing the Red Hawk Sports Network. Montclair State is one of the largest Division III schools in the country, over 500% larger than the average Division III school, and it's the second largest school in the state behind only Rutgers, which is a Division I university. Right. So I was wondering, have you considered a move to Division I athletics at all?
Yeah, I've thought about it, and people have asked me about it, and so there's a couple of different reactions I have to it. So one is, be careful what you wish for. As I said, I come from Arizona State University, obviously big Division I sports program. As I've said to other people who have raised this issue, I'm like, I don't think you fully understand, because I didn't, you fully understand what it means to run a Division I sports program until you're in it. Right? And just how consuming it is and how hard it is to sustain. And obviously part of that is financial. this is an appropriate conversation because I'm sure you've seen the headlines, a bunch of journalists about what's happening at Rutgers. So put aside the question of accounting and whether that was a great way to account for that. But that's not the real story. The real story is look at what it means to maintain a program like that. You spend $400 million to get to be Division I or whatever, choose a number, for the privilege of then figuring out how to come up with $100 million every year. So huge financial obligation. But it's not just that. It's actually the stress on the institution to run a sports program and to balance that with the other things you're trying to do on the campus. It is a bear. And so then you have to ask the second question, which is, what are you trying to achieve by doing that? I think a lot of people say, well, it raises your profile. And there's no doubt, right? So you flip on the TV and oh, I'm on ESPN. Like, yeah, okay, I get it. And I'm not blind to that. But there are an awful lot of universities that are well known and prominent that are not Division I schools. You guys ever heard of the University of Chicago?
Yeah.
It's a pretty good school. Yeah. I haven't seen them in the Rose Bowl anytime in the recent past, or Caltech, or we could come up with a bunch of other schools. Mm-hmm. I'd rather define this university, first of all, on things that have not necessarily related to athletics, but even in terms of athletics, to say we have the best Division III program, and we have a Division III program that is integrated into this sort of campus life, and our student athletes are able to really achieve on a level as students and athletes that you don't necessarily get at other Division III schools. So I think it's possible to differentiate yourself and prove excellence without necessarily being a Division IA school. And quite frankly, I think you get more bang for your buck by doing that. Now, look, is it a slam door? No, I mean there's always a possibility, but it's an uphill. It would be an uphill journey to sort of get me to say, yeah, that's the best. Yeah. That's the highest and best use of our time, energy, and resources. That's going to advance this university to the level of prominence that I think we all think it deserves and want to see. Unfortunately, there are old models where you could have one sport be division, but those are off the table. That doesn't exist anymore as an option. So, thank you. Yeah.
So going back to Jenna and Kaya's points on diversity, you actually mentioned public service and how we want to incorporate diversity into that. And you've mentioned before that you want to work with the city of Paterson.
Right.
I was wondering if you could speak a little bit on that and how that affects the university in any way.
Well, the part of what makes me excited about universities is I think they can be incredibly powerful tools to advance our communities, and especially if you approach it in a collaborative, constructive way, where the university isn't sort of an invading entity that's doing research on communities or on people, but actually is a partner. The way I like to think of it as a co-PI or a co-principal investigator. All of a sudden you take this incredible community, right? 20,000 smart, motivated students, faculty, and staff. I think a lot of young people are super motivated about making a difference in the world. And you say, what if we took this thing and said, let's apply it to some of our greatest challenges? I think you have an incredible opportunity for difference making, right? And so I mentioned Paterson because I think Paterson is a really interesting city, but I'm not exclusively focused on Paterson. I want to be clear on that. We do all kinds of great stuff in Newark and in East Orange and West Orange, and obviously in Montclair and Clifton and Little Falls and the immediate surrounding towns. The reason why Paterson is so intriguing to me is this dynamic, young city, obviously a lot of needs, but a lot of opportunities, and opportunities to integrate the work that we do, whether it's in nursing or education or in sustainability. And there's a huge receptivity in Paterson to work with Montclair State University to advance their community, and that's the key. I had a great initial meeting with the mayor of Paterson. Very excited. I've made a couple now trips there to learn about the town. Like literally, the day before I started, I was in the in the historic center at the Great Falls, and just couldn't be more excited about the opportunity there. Hinchcliffe Stadium, which has a real history to it, is one of the 2 remaining Negro League stadiums that's under renovation. I think there's a great opportunity for us to play a role in the programming there and building a museum, have a whole sports program that's related to that. I just think it can be tremendous. And the cool part is you create those learning by doing opportunities. You can bring dollars in to support that activity. It gives us a chance to have relationships with the community on an equal footing that are not always so easy for universities, which seem like aliens, quite frankly, in a lot of communities. And that has long-term implications in terms of who comes to the university. Because all of a sudden, there are folks who are in Patterson, maybe we're working in Patterson high schools, and people are saying, these people from Montclair State University, like they're not aliens, like they talk just like I do, and I'm dealing with them, like maybe I should go to Montclair State University, which when we're just this literally city on a hill, we seem like we're another planet. We do, right? If you're growing up in Patterson and you've never been over here and you come here and like, I don't belong there. That's not for me. But all of a sudden, if you're part of a program, it makes a huge difference. So I think that there's so many benefits of having that relationship, that it's truly transformative. And I'm really excited about the opportunity in the community surrounding the university, because as I've gone out, and that's one of the things I've spent a lot of time on just in my first few weeks here, I've been not just in Patterson, I've been talking to people, to a person. They're just like, when do we get started? Right? It's not like, well, what would I do with Montclair State University? They don't sort of scratch their head and say, well, you're just a bunch of eggheads and I don't even know, like, what do I do? They're just like, great, like, where do I sign up? What do we do? And so now what we have to do here is build the capacity to field those enthusiastic phone calls that say, hey, I have an idea, who do I talk to? But we just have to build the machinery to do that. And we have a lot already. I mean, I'm sure you all probably know of some of the stuff we do. Obviously, we have students who are preparing to be teachers all over the place. We have nursing programs who are, students are embedded. I could go on. So it's not like we're starting from scratch. We just need to build up the capacity in the long run. And in my mind's eye, I can see a future where every student is doing something. It's just part of being a Montclair State University student. Is you, at some point, will have some project, and it can be regardless of your major, right? Maybe you're a business major and you're working with small businesses or whatever. You can fill it in there.
Yeah, increasing Montclair's reach to all of these towns around us is really important to me, and especially in towns that have lower income, I think is really important, and I'm really glad that you have a plan to do that.
Yeah, that's what I did in Arizona. I mean, it's not just to sort of, it's like, I wonder if this can work, right? Part of my enthusiasm is because I know it can work, because I've seen it, done it, and it's not always easy. I mean, I want to be clear. It's not just everybody does a dance and you hug and no. There's some friction and there's some history to overcome. I mean, if I launched a project in a community in Central Phoenix called Maryvale, and one of the first things we did was to have a sort of listening session with members of the community. And one of the first things we asked was like, well, what do you dislike about the university, and what do you dislike about partnerships with the university? And guess what? They had lots of answers, which was pretty interesting. And we learned a lot, and things that you might not think about. So here's an example. A lot of times people from universities will do research, like they'll do surveys, and maybe some of you have been involved in projects like that. And the question is, did you report back to the community what you found? Because the people in the community are like, you come and you ask us all these questions, you study us, we're your lab rats, and then you don't even tell us what you found. And it's like,
Disconnect.
Yeah, well, it's just so disrespectful, right? Like, I'm going
Yeah.
to study you, but you don't even deserve to know what we found. Like, that's not good. So we need to not only do it, but sort of do it in the right way, establish sort of best practice, respectful practice, and become a model of how you do that community collaboration. So I think there are a few aspects of what I hope this university becomes known for. So I think scale is important, but it's important for a reason, right? So I think that part of the reason you achieve scale has to do with your aspirations and whether or not you can achieve your aspirations at your current size. So I think that this university can continue to grow, but the reason it would continue to grow would be because you feel that part of your mission is to make what you're offering here accessible to more people. It flows very much from the previous point. And so so the vision I have is that Montclair operates at a scale required to meet the demand from the community for what we are doing. And so I hope that what we're doing is so attractive and exciting that there's going to be a lot of demand. I think that demand is going to look different in the years ahead than it has looked historically. So let me talk a little bit about what I mean by that. So first of all, I think, and COVID has something to do with this in terms of accelerating it, but I think it was happening anyway. I think people are going to be looking for new ways of engaging with educational institutions. And there will always be a place for the 4-year on-campus degree program, but I think people are looking for a lot more variety. Maybe a mix where some of it's online and some of it's face-to-face, or some of it's online asynchronous, but some of it's synchronous, right? We all now all of a sudden like, oh, that Zoom class was pretty good actually, right? I think we all learned that. And so I think people are going to look for degrees offered in whole new ways with hands-on experience, those things integrated, experiential learning becoming a significant part. So I hope that part of what happens is that we become known for the diversity, not just of the substance, but of the modality in which people can learn at this university. And I think that will be even more true at a graduate level than at an undergraduate level, although I think it will be both. And so that's my sort of feeling on the sort of how we look and how we operate. I think from a substantive point of view, building on what I've said, I want this to be the Public Service University of New Jersey. And I mean that in a couple different ways. So one, as I've already sort of building on what I've already said, I want people to say, well, that's a university that exists to serve the people of New Jersey. And that's what it means to be a public university. So we don't do this stuff in Patterson and other communities and say, oh, that's nice, we did this thing on the side. No, that's what we exist to do. Yeah. And if we're not advancing the well-being of our communities, then we're failing. And I want people to judge us that way, and I want to be known that way. I also want to be a school of choice for young people who want public service to be part of their life as students, but part of their life beyond being students. And that part of the reason you come to this university is to prepare for a life of meaning and difference making. And so that involves creating those opportunities, but also building a curriculum and a mindset that puts people on that trajectory. And my hope is that that's what this university is known for. I mean, I think we operate in an unusual place, so different than Arizona, where there were very few universities. As you know, there are a whole bunch of universities just in New Jersey, let alone in New York and the metropolitan area, right? Like, there's just like everywhere, right? And so the question is, well, what makes this university different, and what's the identity? And I think this idea of service and commitment to community becomes the defining characteristic, and that students who graduate from here have had an opportunity to get experience while they're in school, and they're ready to hit the ground running. And I think that will be a magnet for a lot of people in New Jersey and beyond. It'll be just an exciting place that people want to come.
All right, so on the topic of expansion and Montclair State's future, let's talk about residential life.
Yeah.
So Montclair State is mostly known as a commuter school,
Right.
with only 30% of undergraduate students actually living right on campus. So as the school continues to grow significantly, how do you plan on expanding our residential life program.
Well, here's the tricky part, right? Which is that what people want? So that, I mean, I think that we are operating at a moment of uncertainty, and that's there's a dilemma there, right? Which is, because I assume there's going to be a question about cost.
Always.
Of course.
Right?
Always.
So if you commit to building a model where you've got thousands of rooms, and there are lots of universities around the country that are facing this, right? As you guys probably know, right? That was one of the major problems for COVID, is that a lot of universities have thousands of rooms that they have to fill and they have to pay. And so a lot of people said, well, I'm not living in the room, I want my money back, right? And it's like, okay, but we still owe several $100 million, like, so somebody's got to pay that bill. And so the problem is, if you grow your capacity for on-campus living in anticipation that a bunch of people are going to want to live on campus, but it turns out, yeah, not so much. Okay, now you're in a position where you're going to have to figure out how to pay for it, and that's going to limit what you can do in other realms. Right? So this is a real thing, and I think a lot of people don't fully embrace the idea that universities, yeah, sure, they're nonprofit, but they're still enterprises that still have a budget, and you still have to make it work. And so I want to grow the residential capacity in a way that is responsive to demand. And if we're getting the interest from students to live on campus, then we need to figure out how to meet that and to build an environment where we're supportive of the students. They have a good experience and so on. But I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say that that's free. It's not free. It costs money, and it creates a demand. Having said that, I still think there's something very positive about the on-campus learning and living experience, particularly for an undergraduate. And I don't know, but I'm assuming you're all happy that we're back
Very
in
much
person
so.
and on campus.
Very
and
much so.
You're not in a basement somewhere staring at a computer screen all day. Like, I don't like that very
Well,
much.
he's a commuter. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's
I'm still glad to
he's
be
still
back.
glad to be
Yeah.
back, right? He's still glad to be back, and so I think we need to support that and build an environment where people want to be on campus. So having said what I said before about that, there's going to be more remote learning and more of those modalities. One of the interesting things that means is that if you're going to have on-campus learning persist, you're going to be forced to really study yourself and say, what do we do to make it worthwhile for a student to spend thousands of dollars to pay for a dorm room, and that's a significant bar to clear because it's a big investment, right? And not everybody wants to take out the loan or have their family invest or work the hours that are necessary to do that. And by the way, I don't blame them, right? That's a big deal. So if we're going to ask people to do that, we have to deliver on something and offer something that's there. That's not necessarily in the classroom, although it partially is in the classroom. But I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but I don't think when people say, why are they glad to be back, it's probably not because they missed being in the classroom with their professor. Like, oh, thank goodness I get to hear the lecture face to face. I miss this so much, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you all feel that way. But it's the other stuff, right? It's being part of a community. It's the extracurricular activities. It's the social opportunities. It's just running into your friend walking across the campus. That's what people missed. And so if we're going to have an increase in the on-campus living population, we need to make sure we're delivering those experiences as much as the classroom experience. And I think we've made a lot of progress at Montclair in terms of building. I've talked to students who've said even now from like when they started, there's much more activity, there's more engagement, the students are more, it feels more like a real campus, I guess would be the way to put it. So we just need to keep going down that path, and then I think the demand will be there, and if the demand is there, then we'll respond by building capacity.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, kind of in a similar realm, if you had gotten a chance to take a look at our athletic facilities on campus, and if you had given any thought to renovations, particularly with our indoor athletic facilities.
Well, I think that there's a need for more space, indoor space in general.
Yeah.
Right. We don't have a lot of indoor space for athletics or anything else, to be honest. And so I think we all see that as, if you're sort of laying out the needs of the campus, that's a clear part of the list. I think as a general matter, there's an opportunity to up our game in terms of athletic facilities. I see that. What I want to do is figure out how do we do that in a way that's beneficial to both the teams and also to the general campus community, right? So that it's fully beneficial.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer. Big believer in maximizing the return on your investments, all investments. And so I want to make sure that whatever we're doing is beneficial across the board. And so I see that. Look, the trouble is, you say, well, he said that he thought that was a good idea. It's like, yeah, and I'll come up with a whole bunch of other good ideas. Like there's a whole bunch of other good ideas, like more theater space and more lab space, and yes,
Add it to the list.
it's easy to say yes because I agree. The question is how do you do it all?
Yeah.
And so that's what we need to figure out, and we're going to engage in a sort of strategic process, figure out where the investments are, figure out where the capital comes from. Right? It's not just, unfortunately, there's no Santa Claus that I can write a letter to and say, "Dear Santa, I want a new basketball arena." I wish. I wish. If you know that person, he doesn't have to have a big gray beard or whatever. I'm ready. I'm ready. But yeah, I think there's opportunity to improve that infrastructure for sure.
Awesome.
So I feel like we can't have this conversation without talking about COVID.
Mm-hmm.
The Delta variant is ripping through the United States and numbers are climbing. So I was wanting to ask you, are you going to start enforcing regular COVID testing?
Right
Just to keep track of
now,
numbers?
you mean sort of just testing everybody, vaccinated or not?
Vaccinated or not, because people who are vaccinated are getting infected with the Delta variant,
Right.
just to keep track of numbers and to make sure that everyone's safe.
Right now, I think we're okay. I think we have not ruled anything out in the long term. We're going to try and be responsive to circumstances, right? So, for those of you who are on campus in the summer, we made a pivot based on what the CDC was saying, and so we're wearing masks regardless of vaccination for exactly this reason. I think right now, everything that we're seeing tells us that the risk to somebody who's vaccinated, especially if you're wearing masks, is relatively low. Plus, I think this is relevant, our community rate of infection, and it's not just infection, right? So here's where the nuance comes in. The serious illness and hospitalization is at a very low level relative to other parts of the country.
Of course.
We can get into the politics of the country. And so we are in a situation now where the campus and the overall community has the resources and the capacity to deal with what we're facing. And the rates of infection that we've seen so far are actually much lower than the community at large. So I feel pretty comfortable about it. Having said that, would I rule that out as a possible response? No. I won't rule it out because, as I've said in multiple public meetings, I feel really committed to the idea that we want to stay on campus and have an in-person learning environment. I think while some people will say, like, what's the big deal? We all went to Zoom, it was no problem. I think that's a very narrow view. I think, first of all, not everybody was evenly affected by the switch to remote learning, and that presumes a certain level of resources, that you have a home where you can just close the door, and that you have a good Wi-Fi connection, and you have good equipment. Like, that's not everybody. And so I just think there's some myopia that leads people to believe, like, well, what's the big deal? So that's the first thing. And that's not even getting into the long-term consequences, the social consequences of having people remote for a long time. I mean, we're seeing, like, for our first-year students, like, they haven't been with other people. They have this sort of this look in their eye, like, oh my God, human beings, I'm in college. Like, think about how weird that is, right? You didn't have your last year of high school. All of a sudden you're plopped down. Yeah, it's like weird, right?
Yeah.
So that all comes at a cost. So I will do what I think is necessary to make this a campus that's safe and open for in-person learning. As you know, we've extended the vaccine mandate to cover faculty and staff. So we're trying to be more comprehensive about it and give everybody a level of confidence in the environment that we have here. And we're constantly monitoring and constantly revisiting our decisions to make sure that they're responsive to the moment. And that's what we're just going to keep doing. And I think that's the most, it's a dynamic situation, whether it's Delta or now Mu or whatever, Omega, whatever the next, COVID is part of the world now. Yeah. Right? I think that's what it's like. It's like, when is this going to be over? If by over you mean COVID disappears, well, it's not going to be over. This is just part of our reality. So now we just got to get better at managing it. And it's not just the disease part. It's the social part. It's the politics.
Of course, there's no going back to normal.
No.
Or this is our new normal.
This is new normal.
Yeah.
But I don't think we've figured out what that is yet, right?
Yes.
And so we're just going to have to accept it. And by the way, that doesn't mean the new normal is not going to be nobody ever gets sick.
Of course.
Right? I mean, that's unfortunate, but it's not going to be zero. It's impossible.
President, if I may step in here, how much more time would you like?
I'm here. I'm enjoying talking to you guys, so I'm not rushing off the stage.
Okay, awesome. Thank
Okay,
you.
Yeah.
I'll go next.
Yeah.
Related to Bernice's question, we did an article highlighting student reactions to the mask mandate. One student voiced their concern over whether the campus administration trusts the vaccine after putting a mask mandate in place despite the majority of the campus community being vaccinated. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, I don't think that, so I'm a little puzzled by the question, to be
Okay.
honest, because I don't know that trusting the vaccine I don't know that wearing masks indicates a lack of trust in the vaccine. That's what the question implies.
Yeah.
I think, and I guess I shouldn't be puzzled because I thought that some of the messaging around the vaccination was wrong. So I think people thought of the vaccination as being like a bulletproof shield or an inoculation, but it never should have been presented that way. Yes, it does reduce your likelihood of being infected. There's no doubt about that. All the data shows that. But what it really shows is that it dramatically reduces the likelihood of getting seriously ill and hospitalized. Okay, having said that, I would rather nobody got sick. And so if wearing a mask on top of being vaccinated means that you're less likely to get sick, and then if you get sick, you're less likely to get really sick, that seems really important. And of course, the other part that got lost at the outset of the whole masking thing, and this was an error. I mean, I think we have to be honest about public health failures. Wearing a mask, yes, it's about protecting yourself, but it's about protecting the community and limiting transmission. And we know that while the viral load of a person who's vaccinated may be lower, in somewhat, it's not zero. And so why wouldn't we continue to be a community that cares about each other and we wear masks to reduce the risk of spread? That's how we're going to stay here. And so I don't view it as an indictment of the vaccine or anything like that. I view it as being responsible. And I don't like the phrase follow the science because I think that's sort of facile and simplistic. But we have learned, as we've progressed, we've learned more about this thing, right? We learn more every day. And we've learned that this is the best defense we have. From a transmission point of view. And the vaccine defends us from really getting sick, but this defends us from infection even more so.
And it goes on the topic of public service, right?
Yeah.
And serving the community, and by being vaccinated and wearing your mask and being conscious of others is that responsibility of public service, which is something that we all implement in our organizations.
Yeah, and one of the themes that I really like talking about is the idea of public goods, which, for those of you who may have taken economics class, is a really important concept that I don't think we talk about enough, which is there are certain things that we can only create together. And the interesting thing is we can only create them together and we can only consume them together. I can't really stop you from consuming it. So the classic public good we talk about usually is clean air, right? So if the air is clean for me, it's clean for you. And there's very little I can do to stop you, save from like putting a bag over your head, from breathing the clean air. That has other negative consequences.
Yeah.
So I can't stop you from breathing the clean air. And the only way I can have clean air is if we all agree to limit our emissions or whatever. And if we don't, we're not going to have clean air. And as you all know, like the problem is that if you're all polluting, I'm just going to be like, well, screw it, I'm going to pollute too, and then the air gets even dirtier, right? So public health, we've lost sight of the fact that it's a public good. And we just act like, well, my health is my business. And it's like, yeah, sort of, but actually it turns out not entirely. Because if you don't take care of yourself and you decide to get sick, that's actually going to make me sick, or it's going to make my family sick. And so we've lost the idea that health is actually a public good. And so that's part of why we're here, because we've adopted this mentality that it's this highly individualized thing. And while there's some truth to that and there's some context where that's accurate, in many respects, health is only something that we can enjoy as a community. And if other people aren't willing to do it, then none of us get to have the benefit. And so because of the nature of COVID and the vaccination and masks, we have some ability, obviously the campus is not hermetically sealed, but we have some ability to create health as a public good on our campus and maintain it. And so part of the message that I would like to deliver, and you can all help deliver that, is that we do these things not because the government tells us to, or not because the university issued a rule, but because we're a community and we're going to create this public good together because it's the only way we can have it. And so I'd like to sort of embrace that idea and get the campus to embrace that idea that's the reason to do it. Not because somebody told me to, but because I value this community and I value being part of it. And it's the only way that we can function effectively is if we hold ourselves accountable to that.
Absolutely great, and that's both on faculty and students
Totally.
and everyone
Totally.
in the university.
Yeah, that's not just, it's not like students only, it's everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on the current topic of, the current issues that are happening on campus, a really big issue is the traffic, right? Traffic has never been this bad before.
Yeah.
You're having drivers that are stuck on Clove Road for 30
Right.
minutes and plus,
Right.
and even affecting residential students, shuttle service buses,
Yep.
right? So we know that Montclair State tried to create an exit through the Yogi Berra Drive, but the town of Clifton said, nope,
Right.
can't do that.
Right.
So is it on the top of like the school's priority list to work on this traffic congestion?
Yeah, it's clearly an issue. By the way, I think it's made worse by COVID, right? Because people are nervous about mass transportation, and so there are more cars coming to campus. I mean, everything interacts, right? We live in a complicated world. So yes. So first of all, we'll still look for a solution on the. I don't know if it's the existing plans or something else, but yes, that would help. But quite frankly, that's not going to help some of the internal traffic things that you're talking about. And I'm aware of it, if only because people who work in the Overlook building are like, I got caught in traffic on the way to the other end of campus, and I'm like, okay, that's a little weird, but okay. So yeah, I think it's an issue. I mean, I think we'd like to figure out how we can get fewer people driving to campus and using their cars to get around campus. I'd like to figure out how we get the campus to have a smaller carbon footprint generally, and so that would be part of it. I think as we look to the future of campus planning, one thing that we've talked about a lot is how do you make better walking opportunities from the sort of residential part of campus to the academic part of campus. It's not as easy as it should be, to be honest, and so I think that there's an opportunity there. And one thing that immediately comes to mind is how do you come up with maybe shuttle routes that are not impinged upon by the other traffic, because obviously that would increase the attractiveness of a shuttle if it bypassed the traffic. So if you're sitting in traffic anyway, it's like, well, I'll sit in traffic and listen to my own radio as opposed to sitting in traffic on a shuttle bus. So I think that there are solutions there, but it's a message that I've heard loud and clear. The only thing that I'll say, which is funny, is that I've heard that, and at the same time you hear, but I want more parking spaces, and it's like, yeah, you realize that those two things don't go together, right? If you build more parking spaces, guess what?
I think at this point we've accepted the parking is bad.
Yeah, but well, you may have, but people say there's too much traffic and not enough parking, and I'm like, yeah.
Can't have your cake
You
and eat it
can't,
too.
yeah, that's not going to work, right? And the reality is, whether we solve the Yogi Berra Drive thing or whatever, the campus is what it is. It's locked into this space. It's never going to be that there's going to be an interstate coming up to our front door, and so that would be what we should be looking for, ways that people come to campus in other ways. And to your point, if there are more people living on campus, that helps to solve that problem too.
There's that consideration.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely,
you.
absolutely.
So this past summer, bills were passed to allow student athletes to profit off their name, image, and likeness for the first time ever. I was
Yeah.
wondering, what are your thoughts on that, and how do you think the university can help its student athletes leverage that to its full potential?
Yeah, I don't know that that's going to be a real big issue here. I mean, obviously that's something that's more of a, you know, a big time athletics thing, and it really only affects a handful of athletes, right? So I don't have a strong sort of proposal. Oops, that's telling me that our time is probably nigh. But I think I have a couple different thoughts. One is, I totally get why the existing system is a pretty hard one to swallow. You have student athletes who are being monetized in some sense, and a lot of people are making money and they're not profiting from it, and that's a little strange to my mind. And so the question is, how do you implement this new reality in such a way that you don't end up with this two-tiered system where you've got massive inequity and unfairness on campus? I don't know how to do that, to be honest. But I do think it's a splash of cold water in sort of the space of college athletics that says we can't just keep on doing the same thing, because it's apparent to everybody that there's something out of kilter here when you have, you know, Nick Saban making God only how many millions of dollars a year. What is it, $12 million a year now, something like that?
Yeah.
And you have the players on his team who are, yes, they're getting a scholarship, but they're basically professional athletes in the way they have to live their life, right?
Yeah.
That's hard to sustain.
Yeah.
So I think there's an opportunity here, even though I think this is a clumsy way to do it, there's an opportunity here to build some more fairness into the college athletics structure.
I agree.
All right.
So I have our final question.
Okay.
You've mentioned coming from sunny Arizona State
Yeah.
to Montclair State. I want to know, what about this university attracted you, and what do you hope to leave with?
Oh my God, you're ready for me to leave already?
Of course not.
I just got here.
So
We want you to stay for so long. Years and years
Like
to
she's
come.
already asking me. So I'm here, you know, first of all, I'm here in part because there's a lot of the DNA in common with ASU, right? I mean, you know, I'm very committed to the idea of public universities, and public universities in particular that measure themselves by their ability to be accessible, inclusive, and excellent, right? That don't view that as impossible to put together. And that's 100% Montclair State University. And so I'm very excited about that. I'm very excited about the engagement with the community already, but the embrace of doing much more. As I've already told you, the reason why I'm in this is because I view it as a way to make a difference in the world, and I think universities can be powerful engines of change. So let's just take it back to, you know, your question about Patterson. Like, so Patterson's a community that's in great need, right? And not a lot of money in the municipal government, right? I mean, it's stressed. And I say, well, I have this tool over here that can be torqued to do something about that. And I have a university that embraces that idea, students that want to be part of it, faculty doing work that's relevant. And so when presented with the opportunity to sort of not only lead it, but shape it and design it and redesign it again to figure out how to make that work, that's just an exciting opportunity. And it's fulfilling the, you know, the sort of basis for why I'm in this. You know, as I said, and this is the God honest truth, like, I didn't want to be president of a university. I want to be president of a university like this, right? One that wants to be this, that has the kind of students that are here, that has the kind of aspirations that it has here, and that's, you know, that's what's exciting. That's what's exciting, and it flows pretty naturally from my experience at ASU, which taught me a lot of lessons and also gave me the confidence to know what's possible.
Thank you so much for having
No, this is great. Great
with us.
conversation. I enjoyed it, and we'll do it
Yes.
again.
Of course.
So you can ask me, well, how come all those great things you talked about haven't happened yet? But I look forward to it. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Good luck with
you.
everything.
Yes.
Thanks.